wheels, there's also a kick wheel and a treadle wheel, which if you join Open Studio, you can try those out. They're in the Open Studio room, which is the one you passed through before you walked in. So that's, even if there's a class going on, there's always wheels available over there. There's only 6 or something, so you have to get here early, but they are there. And so yeah, these are whisper lights. They're made by Shimpo. I love them. They're really quiet, especially when we have 16 going at once. We can hear each other's thoughts, which is great. They turn in 2 directions. So the first on-off, the first little lever is on-off. At the end of class, please remember to switch it off. So on is up. And then the little toggle forward and backwards is going to be clockwise and counterclockwise. So this is clockwise, obviously counterclockwise. I'm often referencing it like an analog clock. So knowing like where 12 o'clock is, 3 o'clock, 6, 12, 3, 6, and 9. That's me sitting here. So if you are right-handed, actually who's left-handed? One. All right, Lisa. Yeah. So which way the wheel goes depends on which is your dominant hand. If you're right-handed, you want it counterclockwise. Left-handed, you're gonna go clockwise. So let's say you just, you come back and you completely forget which way. The easy way to tell is that it's correct is dominant hand, my right hand. When I just place it in this comfortable spot here, not like, right, that's awkward. Here, the clay is slipping off of my fingers, right? Versus if it was spinning the wrong way, clay's coming at my fingers and they might get caught, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So I want to go in counterclockwise. I'm right-handed. This is your splash pan. Sometimes they don't get put back on properly. And so there's this like little lip here. It goes underneath the metal lip there. And try your best. I mean, you can really try and get it to click. But as long as there isn't like a gap open, this will get you messy. It'll get the neighbor messy. So just keep that closed. And this prevents the slip from spraying all over the place. What I like to do, sorry? Mostly, yes. Good point. Try and keep yourself clean. You can see that David is wearing a smock. That's a great idea. We always suggest bringing a towel too. Laying a towel over your lap is really nice. Black is not the color to wear unless you like this look. But the dust and the clay, when it dries out and turns into dust, is really bad for your lungs over time. One day exposure is not going to do anything. But we want to teach you best practice, and so being as clean as you can is really important. So if you get clay all over you and then you go walk around for the rest of the day with the clay, it's going to dry, and as you're walking, it's just going to like waft up into your face. If you do this for a lifetime, it's called silicosis of the lung, and it's when they cremate you, your lungs will be left as like an encapsulation. Or,
your final project.
Yeah, your final project. I make weird jokes all the time, so I apologize. So please, yes, best practice, keep yourself as clean as possible. Even if you get clay on yourself, at the end of the day, I just take a sponge and I try and wipe it off. So, there's big sponges over there, you can use fresh water. So anyway, try and throw this ball of clay. We want it in a ball or at least a rounded bottom down into the center. You don't have to slam it, but just kind of a nice little tap. And then we're gonna, before we add water, just push down and in. We don't want to lose the height of this ball. So we're not trying to make a pancake. We're trying to, my friend Amber said the other day, I listened to her teach, she said it's like a melted Hershey Kiss. And I love that. So what's nice about these Shimpos is they spin freely when the wheel's not on. So I can kind of, it's like a banding wheel. Do this. And I just got my nails done. Look at that.
Hand level.
If anyone has long nails, it can inhibit you. Having short is nice, but I saw someone on Instagram with nails this long, like throwing perfectly. So when you maybe it doesn't matter. Okay, so I feel like it's nice and stuck. I always say give it a little wiggle here, and then I like to seal it down before I add water. So what this is doing is we're preventing water from getting underneath the clay. It would, if water got under it, it could just like fall right off. The wheel, the pedal, I like to have it on my right foot and right hand. I just like it there, it doesn't matter what side. But full speed, you really never need to go this fast, pretty much ever. The fastest you'll ever go is like 3/4 speed. And then slowly, as you go through the steps, you slow the wheel down. So I like to say when the wheel is going fast, that's when we're using the most force. And as you slow the wheel down, you're touching the clay much more delicately. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. So no water yet, but it feels nice and stuck. I'm gonna go 3/4 speed, and then the nice thing about these wheels, the Shimpo wheels, you can take your foot off the pedal and kind of move it out of the way. You can keep this spinning the whole time. You can walk away and come back, and it's fine to keep it spinning. Don't feel like you have to stop it. But, because I think sometimes we tend to want to go faster and faster. So it's nice to just set it and forget it. All right, so you can keep your tools in your water bucket if you want. All right, so now we can add water. You never need to scoop water, right? Too much water is going to oversaturate our clay. Too little amount of water will cause too much friction. So we want this just the perfect Goldilocks amount of water. And at first we can just rest our hands, and you see it starts kind of liquefying and becomes slip. We want this slipping sensation to always be happening. As soon as if you left, I'll leave my hands here for a second and add a little bit of pressure. If it's getting more and more tacky, as soon as you start really feeling the grit and the tackiness, you can even see it changed, you need more water. So as I'm doing this, watch, pretty much I'm kind of constantly dipping my hands in the water. That
You never drop water.
sometimes, I don't teach it in the
Oh, okay.
beginning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we tend to use too much water in the
Right,
beginning.
yeah,
At the end of class, you don't want this full of water, but you also you don't want it to be dry. So that's how a kind of indication that I know you've used the right amount of water. Some people throw in no water, like some Japanese masters. I don't know. Okay, so posture, we want to be feeling, this is awkward for me, this height, but you want to be able to rest your elbows on your legs. If you can't get your leg up, we do have these bricks over here, and there's some on the other side. That's a massive brick. There should be some bricks laying around. Okay, borrow that? Okay, I'm gonna borrow this. I'll find them for you if you need them, and I can help you figure that out. But it's nice to be able, you can put your feet up, right? And now you can see, I can comfortably rest my elbow on my leg. We need to keep our body as still as possible, our hands especially, when we're dealing with the clay. It will help everything, and you'll understand as you learn. But to do that, ways to help us is to plant your elbows. And by planting the elbows, we're basically taking all of these extra joints out, and now we're only dealing with these joints. So we want to center this clay. Why we want to center it, we're creating round things. That's what the wheel is really good at. And right now it's not centered, it's doing this. Can you see that? If you ever are not sure, you feel like it's almost centered, you can always just rest your hand on the clay, and if you see your fingers doing any little wibble wobble, that means it's not centered. So I need to center this. I'm gonna do that by coning up and down is what it's called, but I'm just gonna push in, and then I follow the clay up, and I close my hands around it, and then I cone down. And I'll explain this in more detail. You can just watch it a couple times. So I get under, push in, I'm using quite a bit of force. This is probably the most amount of muscle you need to use at this point. And then cone back down. I did not wedge this clay. Squeeze, follow it up, cone back down. So what I'm doing, if I can break this down for you, is the basic idea is you just need to push from the side, and the only place where the clay goes up. But if I broke it down, what I'm doing is I'm using the heel of my non-dominant hand, which is planted on my leg, and the fingers and the heel of my strong hand, my dominant hand, is stronger. And I am kind of coming from opposite directions and squeezing in basically on 3 points of contact here. And I'm pushing with this and I'm pulling with this. You can even lean a little bit, right? And if I did that and I just went in, you can see it made the clay go up. And then the idea is I'm following it up, I'm not pulling it up, I follow my hands and I push in again. And then I go up and I push in again, smaller and smaller. And at the top, I'm closing around like this. At the bottom, I was using like kind of the bottom part of my hands. At the top, I'm using the top part of my hands. Going down, and just pushing down and forward. I'm leaning into that too. I'm not pushing straight down. So up, I get underneath the clay. I push on this kind of chubby part. I follow it up, close my hands around it. And immediately I push down. And I'll do it with my hands open. I'm not going straight down like this. It's like a joystick that I'm leaning forward. You don't have to do it with your hands open, but if you can see it kind of naturally spirals down. Having your hands closed and touching is always more stable. Whenever you can, I try and keep my hands connected. They act as one tool as opposed to two. All right, so I coned up and down 3 times. That's what you want to do. Why we cone up and down? A couple reasons. One, it increases the plasticity of the clay, but it's also helping us get closer to center. It's not the final act of centering, but it does help us. So, this looks a lot more centered now, right, than when I started, and it's kind of gotten some life into it by putting energy into it. So there's a couple ways to go about fine-tuning the centering. The basic premise is I'm putting pressure from every direction inward, equal pressure. If I push down more, it's gonna pancake out. If I push in more, it's gonna go up. So if I push down and in with equal pressure, and then get to a point where it feels comfortable and good, and then I kind of stiffen up, like clench your muscles. Keeping a nice right angle with the wheel and the clay is helpful. In the beginning, we tend to get these skirts that come out. When that happens, just I'll show you what that looks like actually. And that happens because we're not being strong with our pinkies, right? So that is kind of what the skirt looks like. You can either take your finger and get underneath it, or use this little wooden knife guy. And again, see, look, I'm using 2 hands, connect it. My elbows are planted. I'm holding the tool super stiff. I'm not resting the tool on the clay, right? And the clay would be moving the tool. I'm holding the tool still, and it removes the clay that's farthest down. So, okay, that's a lot of information. So this took me 6 months to perfect, to get down to where I felt comfortable. My teacher, bless his soul, he was on his way out, almost retired in high school, and he didn't care much to teach. But we'll learn it in 5 weeks. So at a certain point too, for those who've taken a class or 2 before, don't get hung up on it being perfectly centered. It's a waste of time. Just move on ahead, and you all by the end of class, we're going to get you to a point where you're dropping a hole down the center and creating a vessel. So this is step 1, get it centered on the wheel. I like to keep my wheel clean. Visually, it's nice. And notice you can just grab your sponge and you're not all over. You just always rest your hand on one spot. So, center the clay. Now, I'm ready to create a vessel. I'm going to slow my wheel down to medium speed. And there's a couple ways to go about this. Some people drop their thumbs in the center. I like to teach, because this is what I do, I drop a hole in the center with my pointer, middle finger, kind of touch it like this. This hand's not doing anything except creating something for this to rest on. So I'm going to drop my hand, and I'm finding the center point. You can feel for it. It feels like a little belly button, or I don't know, it's just like a divot. It's soft in the center. If you don't know where it is, you can always just come in like a record player, nice and slow into the center, and you'll find it. So you're going to follow that down. this hand's doing nothing besides being still, following it down. And maybe add a little water. So you want to leave, you don't want to go all the way down to the wheel head, you want to leave like a centimeter of clay, or half an inch. I like to say centimeter. And if you don't know what that is in the beginning, I can eyeball that and know that's correct because I've been doing this for a while. But to test that in the beginning, take your needle tool. You're gonna go all the way down to the wheel, run your finger to meet the clay and pull them up together. And that tells you the thickness of the clay. All right, and then we're gonna fill in that hole by just pushing inward. See, look, hands connected, elbows planted. All right, so pretty much almost everything you make is gonna start out like this. And then we have to start thinking about the shape. A bowl, it looks different from a cylinder, right? So the cylinder is a flat bottom with a right angle on the inside. When we're throwing, this is the throwing process, we're making that inside shape, the inside of the cup. Don't worry so much about the outside shape right now. You'll trim away the extra clay later. Focus on the inside. And especially with a cylinder, for those who are taking a class or two before, get the bottom part of your cylinder finished before you even start raising your walls. It'll help you out later, because once your walls are up this high, and if you had to reach your hand down in there and kind of like move some clay around, it might be difficult. So what I want to do is I'm going to open up my hole by pulling, I dropped it down, and I'm going to pull it towards my belly button. I like to use the same 2 fingers, but you can do whatever you want to try. Do add pressure slowly. If I add pressure too quick, I'm going to knock it off center. So I'm going to slowly add pressure and then pull it open. Right? And that looks like a good inside the cylinder. Now, compressing your bottom is important. I'm right-handed, so pretty much from now on, I'm going to be working in this imaginary space between 3 and 6 o'clock. If you're left-handed, you're over here between 6 and 9. So right hand's on the outside between 3 and 6, and my fingers on my left hand will match up the fingers on the right hand, and I like to connect the hands somehow. And I even like to saddle the rim or the lip with my thumb, just so it can rest together. All right, and sometimes I even like to hold my sponge, which I usually use those little sponges. Mine's in the mail, hasn't gotten here. I don't even know why. I should have just grabbed one. So you can use a sponge. It's nice because it acts like a snowshoe and it like disperses that amount of pressure you're adding. So, and also you can like slowly add moisture as you go. And so I'm gonna push, just like when we were coning and the clay went up, I'm gonna push in and the clay will wanna go up. And I follow that clay up. I like to think of one hand as more of like a backboard and the other hand doing more of the action and pushing. Do you know what I mean by backboard? Right? It's like something stiff that I'm pushing up against. So right now my inside hand is more of a backboard. So I start at the bottom, that was one pull. You can do as many pulls as you want. This is when maybe I've had water like this.
Okay.
Right? So you can take your sponge and just wet the whole thing. You want to avoid getting a puddle in the bottom, so you can always just soak up that puddle. So I'm going to get under the clay again. See how I'm getting under it? And then I'm going to push up on that lump of clay. My inside hand, and this is for my intermediate folks or people who've taken a class before, inside hand is slightly above the outside hand. So with this wheel spinning, we're dealing with centrifugal force. So it's like that merry-go-round, or like the gravitron, right? At the fair where you're like stuck up against the wall. That's happening with the clay. It's actually, bowls are the easiest thing to make because the clay just naturally stretches. Cylinders you start with, it's a little harder, but to get the walls to go straight up, you have to put more force on the outside to counteract the pulling that the clay is exerting by spinning. So right now I'm noticing it is kind of more of a tornado. I want it to be a volcano. So you can do this thing called collaring. I wet my hands, I just push it in, right? come back and do this again. And so what really becomes a challenge in becoming a good thrower is you want to be able to use as much of this clay as possible to create like a cylinder that is as tall, or just like being as efficient as possible with the clay. Does that make sense? Because I could, at this point, say, oh, this is great, this is the size of my tumbler that I want. But you see how there's this like hourglass shape to it? It has a little bit of a skirt here. I could really take my time and try and actually efficiently use this clay and push up against it. This is a good challenge for those of you who feel like you know what you're doing. And you want to leave this clay about that thick. See the rim? You don't want to go any thinner than that, it becomes too weak. And leaving your rim thick is always a good idea. So I didn't mention, so I start at the bottom and I slowly come up. I want to touch this clay as evenly as possible. And if my wheel is spinning this fast and I move my hands really fast, so like this, or if I slow my wheel down, and I go like this, see how it basically knocked off center the clay, which can be a decoration. If you want to create a spiral mug, you can do that. But it's hard to come back from that. So we want to match the speed of the wheel with our hands. All right, it's gotten a little funky because I just did that. It's okay. And then at the top, so I went up nice and slow. At the top, you do this thing called compressing the lip. I'm not pushing down or squeezing, but I am just, it's like creating a little H with your hand and letting the clay slide through your fingers. All right, and I love this. We're gonna take it off. I wanna get rid of this extra clay right now, so I'm gonna just come down. You can do this or you don't have to. It just saves me time later on with trimming. It's clay that I need to get rid of anyway. I can just put my clay, or actually what I like to do, clay I think of in 3 different stages. This oversaturated stuff that I can't really reuse, this little bit stiffer stuff that I can wedge back into clay to use, and then clay that's ready to go. So the point of me saying is that is this kind of junky stuff, just put in your bucket. The nice stuff that we can all up later, keep separate. All right, so I got rid of that clay, and some of us will get to this point tonight, maybe not this tall, but where we're cutting things off the wheel. And I like to take this wooden guide and create a little groove to guide my wire underneath the pot. Some people hydroplane it off. Has anyone hydroplaned in a car before? This morning. This morning, okay.
It was raining.
That's so scary. I've done it. I grew up on the East Coast. Hydroplaning is slipping on water. And you can just drag this water underneath. You don't have to spin the wheel, you can just kind of go without it. And you can see it does this slippy thing where it's super easy to just like slide around the wheel. Sometimes you can just slide it right off into your hand. And that's one way to go about it. It's pretty easy to do that with this shape, harder with other shapes. So, or there's another way for maybe intermediate folks where you don't need water and you just use the friction of your hands to lift it up and off the wheel. But my hands are wet and I've already cut it off. So, cutting this in half, if you feel like you want to improve on your cylinders, it's always a good idea to cut it in half and see how well you used your clay. And you can see I could have probably used it a little bit better, but it's not bad. Right, it's a pretty close to right angle on the inside, but see how much thinner it is here than down here? So I could have spent some more time making this bigger if I wanted to. So, it's a lot of information, right? I said you maybe get 10%, 15%. So let's try this out. We're gonna come back